Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a stubborn Texas farmer says no to a powerful HOA queen, he sparks a war he never asked for. Then his land burns, and the fire is just the beginning. Lies, betrayal, arson, and revenge ignite in this explosive story of land, legacy, and the high cost of standing your ground. I've lived on this land my whole life, and I've never once mistaken it for anything other than what it is. Mine. 1,100 acres of Texas soil that my father and grandfather tended before me. And God willing, I'll pass it on in better shape than I found it. Out here, the air tastes different, cleaner, real. And yet, no matter how far from town I am, trouble always seems to find its way to my fence line wearing perfume and a plastic smile. The morning Karen Randall showed up, I knew the day was going to go sideways the moment I saw that little convoy of golf carts rolling across the road like a suburban cavalry. 4 of them, all shiny, matching, and driven by the kind of people who wear sunglasses even when they're standing in the shade. Leading them, of course, was Her Majesty of Oakwood Rise herself, Karen, president of the HOA, self-appointed guardian of community values, and the kind of woman who could turn the phrase "good morning" into a threat. They parked right along the dirt road bordering my eastern pasture. I killed the engine on my truck, stepped out, and waited. If they wanted something, they were damn sure going to have to cross onto my land to ask for it. And they did. Karen strutted right toward me in wedge sandals that had no business being within 10 miles of a cow pasture. Behind her trailed 3 board members, each holding clipboards like they were about to condemn my barn. "Hunter," she said, smiling like she had a deed to my soul. "Thank you for meeting with us." "I didn't," I said. "You met with me. On my property." She either didn't hear it or pretended she didn't. Hard to tell with people like her. She gestured toward the meadow behind me, the one sloping down toward the creek. 6 acres of wild grass, old pecans, and a small clearing near the water. Beautiful land, untouched. My favorite place to walk in the evenings when the sky turns copper. "We'd like to rent a section of this area," Karen said sweetly. "Just for one weekend. Our annual Oakwood Rise Family Festival." I let her talk because I wanted to hear how ridiculous it could get. She went on about food trucks, inflatable castles, a small concert stage, paddle boats on my creek, and light, tasteful fireworks approved by the HOA Safety Board. She ended it with the kind of number that tells you she has absolutely no idea what land is worth. "For all that, we are prepared to offer you $1,500. She finished, hands clasped like she expected applause. I stared at her, not angrily, not confused, just amazed. They could have offered me $15,000 and it still would have been a joke. But $1,500 for tearing up my land, trampling my soil, dumping God knows what in my water, and leaving me to clean up after 1,000 people who don't know the difference between a pasture and a parking lot. No, I said. Not now. Not ever. Her smile didn't even flicker at first. It just hardened, like drying plaster. The board members behind her shifted uncomfortably, and one of them, a thin man with an HOA name badge the size of Texas, cleared his throat as if that might magically help. "Hunter," she said, lowering her voice like we were sharing a secret, "this festival is a tradition. It's important to the community." "I'm not part of your community," I said, "and my land isn't a theme park." She tried again. I shut it down again. Then she tried a softer angle, talking about bringing people together. I told her I prefer my people separate. She asked if I'd reconsider. I told her I'd reconsider never talking to her again. Finally, the smile cracked. Not visibly, not to someone who doesn't pay attention, but I've dealt with cattle my whole life. I know when something shifts, even if it's subtle. The look in her eye went from sugary to evaluating, the way a person looks at a barn door they want to push open by force. "Well," she said at last, stepping back, "thank you for your time. We'll be in touch." "I'd rather you weren't," I said. She didn't reply. She just turned, motioned to her little entourage, and marched back to the golf carts. They rode off like offended royalty, leaving a cloud of dust floating in the sunlight. I watched them go, feeling that familiar pressure in my gut, the kind that comes right before a storm nobody asked for. I walked back toward my truck, but something made me stop halfway across the field. A faint buzzing sound, high-pitched, moving slowly overhead. I looked up, a drone, small black, circling lazily above my land. It wasn't mine. I don't own a drone. None of my workers owned drones, and I sure as hell didn't order aerial sightseeing that morning. I stood there for a long minute, watching it hover, then drift toward the direction of Oakwood Rise. I didn't wave. I didn't shout. I just watched it leave, my jaw tight and my hands clenched. Because that was the moment I realized something important. Karen hadn't taken my no as an answer. She'd taken it as a challenge. The fire started on a Sunday night, though calling it night doesn't feel right. Nights are supposed to be quiet, soft, gentle, in the way Texas darkness wraps around a place. But that night felt like something alive crawled out of hell and decided to stretch its limbs across my land. I woke to the smell first. Anyone who spent years around engines, dust, and harvest knows the difference between burning brush and burning fuel. This was the latter. Thick, chemical, wrong. It hit me before I even opened my eyes. Then I heard the distant popping, sharp and uneven, like corn cobs thrown into a campfire, but 1,000 times louder. I bolted upright, heart punching at my ribs. Outside my bedroom window, the sky glowed orange, pulsing like a heartbeat. I didn't bother with boots, just grabbed the jeans from the floor and sprinted out the door, my dog Duke at my heels barking like the world was ending. The heat hit me before I even reached the edge of the porch. A wave of scorching air that made the hair on my arms curl. Down the hill, past the oak trees, the eastern side of my property was fully lit up. My main equipment barn was burning. And not just burning, erupting. Flames taller than the roof, sparks shooting up like a twisted 4th of July. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't think. That barn held the machinery I'd collected and repaired over the years. My grain augers, the old green combine I'd rebuilt with my dad, the heavy tiller that took nearly a month to import. But fear knocks sense back into you real quick, and I sprinted toward the old water pump by the shed, shouting for Duke to stay back. I heard tires skidding behind me. My 2 ranch hands, Eli and Marcus, came barreling down the drive, both half-dressed, eyes wide. Marcus yelled something, but his voice was drowned by another explosion, this time from the diesel tanks stacked near the storage line. The ground trembled under my feet. Flames roared higher. "Call the county fire," I shouted, though Marcus was already dialing. Eli grabbed a shovel from the truck and ran toward the smaller shed, yelling about sparks blowing west. And that's when the second horror hit me. The wind wasn't blowing west. It was blowing north, straight toward the grain silos. If those lit up, the fire wouldn't just take my buildings. It would take everything, every acre, my home. We started working on instinct. I got the pump running and dragged the old green fire hose toward the blaze, soaking anything that wasn't already burning. We shouted back and forth through the roar, barely hearing each other, choking on smoke that tasted like melted plastic and gasoline, and that's when I smelled it. Not smoke, not burning hay. Accelerant. A harsh, chemical sweetness that had no damn reason to be on a farm at 2 in the morning. I froze. Not because I didn't know what it meant. I knew exactly what it meant. I'd spent enough time as a volunteer firefighter in my 20s to recognize the scent. Someone had used fuel or solvent. A lot of it. But before the thought could fully form, Eli shouted again. The fire had jumped to the first grain silo, the big one, the one we only filled a week earlier. If the pressure inside built too fast, we'd have a dust explosion so strong it would level half the property. Then came another sound. Sirens. The county trucks tore up the main dirt road, lights flashing, men shouting orders before they even parked. The next 15 minutes blurred together in smoke and adrenaline. Firefighters scrambled with hand lines, positioned pumpers, and shouted coordinates. Duke barked until I grabbed his collar and pulled him inside the perimeter of safety. It took them over an hour to get the blaze under control. By the time the last flame died out, the barn was gone. Both grain silos were ruined, and roughly 400 acres of crops, acres I had spent months tending, were ash. My equipment was nothing but melted frames. The east pasture looked like the surface of the moon. I stood there in the smoking ruin, my shirt damp with sweat and hose water, my lungs burning. One of the firefighters, a captain I've known for years, walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Hunter," he said, trying for gentle, "it looks like it started with an electrical short. You had wiring in that barn older than me." I nodded, but inside, I was boiling, because I'd already seen enough to know better. Electrical shorts don't create 3 separate ignition points. They don't spread uphill against the wind, and they damn sure don't smell like accelerant. But I didn't say that. Not yet. Not until I could prove it. When the fire trucks left and the first light of dawn touched the blackened field, I walked the perimeter alone. The soil was still warm under my boots. Duke whined beside me, nudging the charred ground with his nose. That smell lingered in the air, chemical, oily, unmistakable, accelerant, poured deliberately. And near the edge of the barn foundation, half melted into the dirt, I found something small, something black, something with 4 propellers. A drone battery pack. Not mine, not Eli's, not Marcus's. I picked it up carefully with a rag, the melted plastic still warm, and held it in my hand. Someone had been watching my land. Someone had mapped my layout. Someone had planned this. And suddenly that drone from a week earlier, the one hovering over my meadow after my argument with Karen, came back to me like a punch to the ribs. This wasn't an accident. Someone had set out to burn my life down. And I damn well planned to find out who. In the days after the fire, the smell never really left. Even with the wind shifting and a couple good rains, the air around my land still carried that faint, sour trace of chemical burn. The kind that soaks into your skin and doesn't wash off. It clung to everything, my clothes, my boots, the damn dog. But more than anything, it clung to me. Not the smoke, but the anger. The official report came back faster than I expected. 3 days. County Fire labeled it undetermined possible electrical. No mention of the accelerant I smelled, no mention of the spread pattern I described, and no explanation for the fact that the flames somehow jumped between 3 separate structures spaced over 200 yards apart with no common wiring between them. Neat little box. Case closed. But I didn't let it sit. I called in a favor from an old friend, Travis Yates, retired ATF arson investigator who once pulled a guy out of a burning meth lab with his own 2 hands. He owed me for bailing his nephew out of a combine accident a few years back, so I cashed that chip. He flew in from Oklahoma, brought his own tools, and walked the site with me without saying much. An hour later, he looked up from the ash near the silo and said the words I was already thinking. 3 separate ignition points, he muttered, all with traces of accelerant. One's got a pattern like poured diesel, the other looks like straight-up acetone or maybe paint thinner. Someone knew what they were doing. That was all I needed to hear. By the end of the week, the insurance estimate had ballooned to over $5 million in damages, machinery, storage, lost yield, contract penalties from European buyers who weren't getting their shipments. It was a number big enough to crack a man's spine, and sure as hell big enough for someone to have a motive. I didn't have proof yet, but I had a damn good idea where to look. That's when Karen made her move. She posted a heartfelt message in the Oakwood Rise Facebook group, complete with a photo of my scorched field. It read, "Please pray for our neighbor, Mr. Hunter Blake, who suffered a tragic fire on his land this week. The HOA is heartbroken and stands ready to help, should he choose to accept the strength of our community." It was pure saccharine poison wrapped in faux kindness. The comments below it were worse. Didn't he refuse to help with the festival? Such a shame. But honestly, that barn was a hazard anyway. Maybe now he'll be more open to community cooperation. I wanted to punch the sun. Instead, I forwarded the post to Travis and asked him to check if Karen had any history with harassment complaints. He came back with something better. "I know a guy," he said. "Low-level contractor, used to do event setup for HOAs and corporate stuff. Says he used to work for Oakwood Rise. Fired a few weeks ago. Wants to talk." That's how I got in touch with Rick Gomez. Rick looked like a guy who'd once been built solid and then softened around the edges from too many cheap beers and not enough sleep. He met me at a diner off the highway, nervous as hell, kept glancing at the door like he expected someone to follow him in. "I'm not trying to get sued," he said before the coffee even hit the table. "But what I heard, man, it wasn't right." I leaned in. "Tell me." He pulled out his phone and set it on the table. Hit play on a voice memo. Karen's voice, unmistakable, filled the space between us. Clear, sharp, surgical. "If he won't rent the land, he doesn't value it. If he doesn't value it, maybe he shouldn't have it. That field is an eyesore. The creek would be perfect for the festival. God knows our parking lot isn't. We make it happen, one way or another." Then a man's voice, one of the HOA board members, I guessed. "You want me to talk to Carlos again?" Karen, "Yes," quietly. No mess. The recording ended. Rick looked at me like he expected me to flip the table. I didn't. I just stared at the phone, jaw tight, the rage crawling under my skin like fire ants. "That enough?" he asked. "No," I said. "I need more." and Rick, bless his conscience, gave me more. He told me that 4 nights before the fire, he saw a black HOA-marked event van pull up to the edge of my property, same side as the equipment barn. He thought they were dropping off chairs or prep gear. Instead, 3 people unloaded a stack of red fuel cans and disappeared into the dark. Rick hadn't thought much of it, assumed it was for generators or fireworks supplies. But after the fire, after he got fired for insubordination, and after that Facebook post made his skin crawl, he put the pieces together. "I think they used me, man," he said. "Used me to scout the site. I gave them maps, electrical lines, parking layout. I didn't know what they were planning, but..." He looked down, ashamed. I didn't ask either. I thanked him and promised to protect his identity. Then I called Travis and told him we had a witness, a recording, and a timeline. By that night, I'd forwarded everything to a local reporter I trusted, Mia Park, sharp as a whip and twice as dangerous when pissed off. She'd been sniffing around HOA corruption for months. This was gasoline on her fire. And speaking of gasoline, Travis called me later with another bombshell. "You might want to check with your crew," he said carefully. "Found signs that the barn had been accessed before the night of the fire. Tools moved. Ladders shifted. I didn't understand at first. Then I did. Someone had scoped the place out from the inside. Someone who knew the layout. Someone who worked for me. I didn't want to believe it, but I'd seen TJ acting twitchy lately. Always on his phone, asking about the harvest schedule, taking photos he said were for documentation. But I wasn't ready to face that yet. Not yet. Because just as the smoke was starting to clear, I was realizing the fire was only the beginning. The 4th Monday after the fire started the way most of them do around here, too damn early, too damn hot, and with a coffee that tasted like scorched hope. I was standing on the edge of the blackened field, clipboard in hand, trying to inventory the skeletal remains of what used to be my future, when my phone buzzed with a call that changed everything. "Travis, they're moving," he said without even saying hello. "DA's taking it. You've got yourself a case." For a second, I didn't breathe. "You serious?" I just walked the evidence into the district attorney's office myself. Audio files, photos, witness statement from Gomez, chemical analysis from the soil, 3 ignition points, the drone wreckage, all of it. He paused, voice turning grim. "And that HOA? They've been sloppy. Turns out your board of suburban warlords has been moving money around like kids playing Monopoly on meth." That same day, the DA's office filed an emergency motion in civil court. I watched the county website refresh right in front of me. Motion to freeze all active bank accounts belonging to the Oakwood Rise Homeowners Association. I nearly dropped my phone. It was a small victory, but a loud one. Loud enough that by that afternoon, the HOA's attorneys were trying to schedule emergency hearings. But the judge denied it. They couldn't touch a damn cent. I filed my own lawsuit the next morning. Blake v. Oakwood Rise, HOA et al. Amount, $12 million. Grounds, property destruction, intentional arson, financial loss, breach of peace, emotional distress, malicious intent. My lawyer, an old-school son of a bitch named Lowell Kane, filed it with the kind of quiet, surgical precision that makes judges sweat and reporters salivate. He told me not to gloat. I told him to shut up and let me enjoy the moment. The story went public 2 hours later. Mia Park ran the piece on Channel 7, 10 solid minutes of scorched fields, aerial shots of the fire zone, the drone evidence, a blurred audio clip of Karen's little "maybe he doesn't value the land" line, and an anonymous quote from Rick Gomez, confirming what we all now suspected. The fire was not just a tantrum. It was a plan. And then came the first arrest. Karen Randall, picked up by deputies in her over-decorated HOA office, still wearing one of those pastel blazers she loved, with a mug on her desk that said, "Boss Babe." The irony almost made me smile. Almost. She was booked on 3 felony counts: conspiracy to commit arson, coercion for property acquisition, and endangering lives by fire. Her mugshot hit the news before she even made it through intake. Less than 24 hours later, her 2 lieutenants followed, Dale Simmons and Krista Wu. Dale looked like a substitute gym teacher who loved bylaws more than his kids. Krista wore pearls to her arraignment and cried when they cuffed her. The whole damn board of Oakwood Rise was suddenly sweating bullets. But while that circus was unfolding, I was dealing with another problem. The insurance company, Ameri Agri Mutual. They sent a nice-sounding woman named Denise to assess damages and review the policy terms. I walked her through the ruins personally. She nodded politely, took photos, and asked all the right questions. Then came the letter. Certified mail. Glossy letterhead. We regret to inform you that due to unresolved determination of fire origin and absence of concrete proof of malicious intent at the time of filing, we are unable to process your claim. I stared at it so long I thought the ink might start. Bleeding. $5 million in losses. Gone. Because they didn't want to touch a politically hot arson case tied to a homeowners association. I called Lowell and faxed him the denial. He didn't even curse, just said, "Good. That means we get to gut them too." So now I was fighting a war on two fronts, HOA and AmeriAgri. But to be honest, I preferred it that way. Fighting kept me moving, kept me from looking too long at the empty soil where my harvest should have been. Then came the next twist. That Thursday night, Travis called me again. "Your boy TJ," he said. My stomach turned. I knew what was coming. He's in the background of one of the HOA planning meetings, on video, from their own Zoom archive. He's the one handing Karen a map. I didn't say anything. "Hunter," he added, softer now. He drew them a diagram of your land, access points, irrigation lines, vehicle gates. He didn't pour the gas, but he lit the match. I wanted to throw something. My boot, my phone, the goddamn water tower. TJ was like a younger brother to me. I gave him a job when he got kicked out of his last one for poor temperament. Paid him fairly, taught him the ropes, trusted him, and he sold me out for what? A few grand and a chance to kiss HOA ass? He didn't show up for work the next morning. Never returned my texts, left his tools behind. Good, let him run. The real reckoning was just starting, and I wasn't running from a damn thing. I used to think fire was the worst way to watch your life fall apart. I was wrong. Bureaucracy burns slower, but it eats deeper. After the flames went out, what came next was a different kind of hell, the kind filled with hollow sympathy, fine print, and boardroom suits who never once put their boots in dirt. Karen's arrest made headlines all over Texas. For a few days, my face was in every local paper, standing next to smoldering rubble with headlines like, "Farmer Fights Back Against HOA Tyranny." But headlines don't rebuild silos. They don't plant new seed. And they sure as hell don't help when your insurance company treats you like you're the one who set the match. AmeriAgri Mutual doubled down on their refusal. They claimed the origin of the fire remained under investigation and that Mr. Blake had not conclusively demonstrated malicious third-party action within the policy timeline. I had literal drone footage. I had chemical soil analysis. I had a goddamn audio confession. Still, they wanted more. So, we gave them more. Lowell filed a second lawsuit, Blake v. AmeriAgri Mutual Insurance Co., seeking $4.8 million in compensatory damages plus punitive penalties for bad faith refusal to pay. That hit their legal department like a cold shower during church service. Suddenly, their reps were a little less smug, a little more quiet. While that storm was brewing, the federal charges started stacking on the HOA side. Turns out, when you light a fire across state-insured farmland, destroy export-bound grain, and endanger multiple lives, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives wants a word. Travis helped submit everything through ATF channels. Within a week, their arson unit was poking through the debris, taking their own samples, snapping photos with government-issued gloves and deadpan expressions. Serious people doing serious work. The kind who don't care about Karen's HOA status or how many potlucks she hosted. Meanwhile, I spent my days knee-deep in ash and paperwork. Rebuilding wasn't an option yet. Too much uncertainty, too many moving parts. I ran numbers every night like a man doing CPR on a corpse, just trying to keep the farm's heart beating. My overseas buyers had already pulled their contracts. Equipment vendors had blacklisted me until payment guarantees could be secured. Bank called twice asking about restructuring. I hung up twice. Some nights, I walked the burned pasture just to remind myself that it was real, that I wasn't going crazy, that all this, fire, betrayal, insurance games, legal war, wasn't just some drawn-out nightmare I'd wake up from covered in sweat. And that's when I saw him. TJ. Just standing on the other side of the fence line, about 30 feet from the old grain tower, hoodie jeans, head down, like he was trying to decide whether to run or talk. I didn't say anything at first, just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. He finally looked up, eyes red, jaw twitching. "I didn't know what they were gonna do," he said. I stayed silent. They just asked for the map. Karen said it was for layout planning, like a courtesy to the neighborhood. Said they'd pay me to help make peace. I swear, Hunter. My blood boiled, but I didn't move. She offered $2,000, he said. I was broke. My truck needed parts. I didn't think. He trailed off, then reached into his jacket and pulled out something wrapped in a freezer bag, a small voice recorder. I kept it. I recorded the second meeting. I wasn't sure why. Just felt wrong. I took it, but I didn't thank him, didn't say a word. Just turned around and walked back across the field, fingers clenched so tight around that bag it nearly cracked. Back at the house, I listened to it. Karen again, her voice colder this time. TJ, it's not your land. Don't get sentimental. Once the fire's over, he'll fold. He's not the kind to fight. You're sure no one will trace it? Please. The man doesn't even lock his damn gates. My jaw locked so tight it clicked. This was the final nail. Lowell flipped when he heard the tape. Travis forwarded it straight to the DA and ATF. Rick Gomez, when we met again, nearly cried when he found out someone else had come forward. Said, maybe I ain't the only one with a conscience left in this damn HOA town. TJ agreed to testify. Said he wanted to make things right. I didn't trust him, but I didn't have to. I just needed his voice in front of a jury. The next morning, I walked into the county courthouse in my work boots and flannel, handed the recorder to the assistant DA, and said, "You wanted irrefutable?" She smiled. "Now we're cooking." By the end of the week, a grand jury had approved a full criminal indictment package. The charges expanded. Karen now faced not just conspiracy and arson, but racketeering. The HOA board was being picked apart, one member at a time. Half of them started lawyering up. The other half started cutting deals. And over it all, like a greasy film on still water, Mary Agri kept stalling, filing motions demanding delays, citing pending determination of third-party liability. Lowell didn't budge. Let 'em try, he said, because the longer they delay, the more the media eats them alive. He was right. Mia Park's follow-up segment aired on statewide television. When fire isn't enough, the farmer, the HOA, and the insurance giant that looked away. Mary Agri's inbox lit up like dry kindling in a lightning storm. Me, I just kept working, kept walking, kept breathing through the smoke that still lived in my lungs like a ghost, because I knew something now. The fire didn't kill my farm. It exposed it. The courthouse smelled like bleach and stale paper. You'd think a place that sees so much misery would at least open a damn window once in a while. But maybe that's the point. Keep things sterile. Keep things cold. Make it feel like nobody ever bleeds in here, even when they're getting cut to pieces. It was standing room only the day Karen's preliminary hearing began. Not just locals either. Reporters, legal bloggers, even a crew from 60 Minutes were in town. Half of Oakwood Rise turned up in pearl necklaces and performance fleece, whispering like they were at a funeral, but none of them seemed to mourn the woman they once called Madam President. The other half stayed home and locked their doors. Karen sat there in her designer suit like she was waiting for a latte, not federal prosecution, but the circles under her eyes betrayed the calm. Her two favorite board members flanked her, Dale looking like he'd aged 20 years in 3 weeks, Krista still wearing pearls like it was a church potluck. Their lawyer, a slick transplant from Houston, tried to play hardball from the jump, claimed the recordings were heavily edited, and that Mr. Blake had personal animosity that tainted the entire investigation. But then the DA queued up the drone footage. There it was, clear as a summer sky. Karen's HOA-marked van pulling up to the edge of my property 2 nights before the fire. 3 people, fuel cans, a black duffel bag. No lights, no permits, no reason. The courtroom went dead silent. Then came Rick Gomez. He took the stand with sweat on his forehead and regret in his voice. Told the jury how he'd worked for the HOA, how he'd delivered materials, seen the fuel, overheard the planning. His voice cracked halfway through. Said he wished to God he'd spoken up sooner. After that came TJ. He looked like hell, eyes sunken, hands shaking, but when he pressed play on the voice recorder, the entire room stiffened. Karen's voice again, crystal clear, cold, and calculated. He won't fight this. He's stubborn, not smart. Once the fire hits, we'll get the land. He'll fold. I watched the jury while the audio played. No one blinked. One woman covered her mouth. A man near the back whispered something to his neighbor, and whatever it was, it made her shake her head like she couldn't believe it. Then TJ added his testimony, How he took money, drew maps, thought it was innocent until it wasn't. He looked right at me as he said it. I sold him out, he said, and I wish I hadn't, because Hunter Blake didn't just lose land. He lost his family's legacy. The prosecutor's office wrapped the day by introducing HOA financial records. Someone had leaked them, possibly a panicking board member, and it showed thousands in unaccounted event logistics expenses. Payments routed through shell companies. One of them had a name that matched an LLC registered to Karen's cousin. Another had no tax ID at all. It was Money Laundering 101 and the HOA board. They were in it up to their Botoxed eyebrows. Karen finally cracked on day 3. Not publicly, not like on the stand, but behind closed doors. Word came through her lawyer that she was considering a plea. She wanted to avoid dragging the community through unnecessary scandal. The prosecutor declined. "This is the scandal," he said. That night, she tried to vanish. Didn't show up for her scheduled check-in. GPS ankle monitor went dark for 6 hours. By the time the sheriff's department realized she was gone, her house was empty. Her phone ditched in a mailbox off Highway 83. They found her 2 states over, New Mexico. She was driving a rented Jeep under a fake ID, $25,000 in cash stuffed in a Trader Joe's bag, and a burner phone with only 4 numbers in it, 2 of them traced to HOA members under federal investigation. They arrested her without incident at a cheap roadside motel that still used keys instead of cards. Said she was on a spiritual retreat. That was the final nail. The judge revoked bail. Immediate remand. She came back to the courthouse in cuffs. No blazer this time, just a standard orange jumpsuit and a hairnet that made her look like a woman who'd lost the vote on how her life was supposed to go. And while all that was unraveling, the insurance suit came to life. Lowell had filed a motion to expedite discovery, and the judge, perhaps moved by the firestorm around the HOA case, granted it. Mary Agri was now officially forced to hand over internal communications, risk assessments, denial protocols. Turned out they'd flagged my policy weeks before the fire, labeled me high exposure, had internal emails referring to my property as a likely loss scenario given external tensions. One agent even wrote, "If the HOA war escalates, this could burn. Literally, let's avoid liability exposure." They knew. They knew this was coming, and they gambled I wouldn't have the strength or the resources to fight both a criminal conspiracy and a corporate denial. They bet wrong. My lawyer filed for punitive damages. The new total? Over $8 million. At this point, my name wasn't just in the local paper, it was in the Washington Post. They titled it, "When Community Turns to Cartel, the Texas Farmer Who Said No." I didn't go looking for attention, but the truth, I wanted people to see it. To see how power warps when no one holds it accountable. How fast a simple no can become a war when people like Karen think they're owed the world. And somewhere, between court hearings, interviews, and walking the ashes of what used to be my life, I realized this was never about the 6 acres. It was about control. There's a certain silence that only a courtroom can create. A silence that sits on your chest like a weight, heavy and suffocating. No birds outside the window, no coughs, no whispers, just the kind of quiet that means something permanent is about to be said. That was the silence in the room when the jury foreman stood up. On the charge of conspiracy to commit arson, we find the defendant, Karen Randall, guilty. It was like a switch flipped. Some people gasped. Others didn't react at all, just stared straight ahead, as if they knew this was coming from the start. Me, I just exhaled, like I'd been holding my breath since the night my barn went up in flames. The foreman continued, on the charge of coercion in pursuit of property acquisition, guilty. On the charge of attempted racketeering, guilty. Each word dropped like a hammer. The 2 board members, Dale and Krista, had already taken plea deals by then. Reduced sentences in exchange for full cooperation. They'd turned over emails, receipts, texts. Hell, one of them even had a damn burner phone they admitted was strictly for HOA business. No one bought the excuse, especially not the judge. Karen was the last domino to fall, and she fell hard. The sentencing hearing came 2 weeks later. I showed up in the same boots I wore during the fire, still scorched on the sides, blackened around the toes. I wanted them to see what they tried to erase. Wanted Karen to look at the damage she called strategic. She didn't speak much during the hearing. Her lawyer tried a Hail Mary. Emotional distress, poor judgment, pressure from the community. claimed Karen never intended for anyone to get hurt, that it was all a logistical misunderstanding gone too far. The judge didn't blink. Instead, he read her own words back to her from the TJ recording. "He won't fight this. He's stubborn, not smart. Once the fire hits, we'll get the land. He'll fold." Then he read the rest of the financial fraud evidence, the shell companies, the event slush fund, the cash withdrawals before the fire. One of the withdrawals was made the day after my initial refusal to rent the land. The judge leaned forward, steepled his fingers, and looked Karen dead in the eyes. "You orchestrated this for power. You endangered lives, destroyed a legacy, and tried to flee justice. This court does not take that lightly." He handed down 18 years in state prison, no parole eligibility before 12 years served. When the gavel fell, Karen's shoulders dropped. For the first time in the entire ordeal, she looked human. Not broken, just small. The HOA didn't survive much longer. Within 3 days, the remaining members resigned en masse. The association declared bankruptcy, completely unable to pay legal fees, restitution, or fines. The court seized the HOA's operating account, then moved to liquidate assets, community center, shared infrastructure contracts, even a small HOA-maintained lakefront dock. Residents of Oakwood Rise were given formal notice that the subdivision would revert to non-governed private ownership. No HOA, no dues, no enforcement, just neighbors, and a long road back to civility. Some cheered, others panicked. A few tried to blame me, of all people, but the ones who knew the truth, they didn't say a damn word. They knew. The civil verdict in my favor came 3 weeks after sentencing. $10.8 million awarded. $3.2 million for property damage, $1.5 for loss of international contracts, $2.1 for emotional harm, public defamation, and attempted coercion, and a massive $4 million in punitive damages, citing calculated malicious acts with willful disregard for the law and human safety. The check didn't come from Karen, didn't come from the HOA either. It came from a court-appointed liquidation account managed by the county. Everything they'd built, their HOA office, their prized community center, even a golf cart fleet, was sold off brick by brick. And the media? They went wild. My story hit 60 minutes. The Texas Tribune even got a segment on a nationally syndicated podcast about land rights and American property law. They called me the man who burned down an HOA with facts, not fire. Hell, someone even printed t-shirts with that quote. I didn't care about the spotlight. I cared that I could rebuild. With the compensation, I bought new equipment, reseeded over 400 acres, brought in a steel contractor from Amarillo to construct 2 new silos, hired back Marcus, even made peace with TJ. Not because I forgave him, but because he'd done the right thing in the end, and that counts for something in my book. But the real victory? I erected a new gate on the eastern edge of the property, right at the same pasture where Karen once wanted her inflatable castles and food trucks. 12-foot steel, jet black, welded into reinforced concrete, and hanging across the arch, a custom-cut hand-forged sign in bright red letters, "Festival canceled, for good." I never expected peace to feel so loud, the kind of loud that's not made of sound, but of space. Empty fields that used to whisper with crops now stood silent under wide Texas skies. My boots thudded against the dry soil as I walked the perimeter of the new pasture, over 400 acres reseeded and coming back to life, inch by inch. No ashes now, just green. A year had passed since the fire. 12 months of lawsuits, interviews, repairs, courtrooms, and endless calls from lawyers, journalists, and neighbors who never gave a damn until they realized they could be next. Now, the land was mine again, quiet again, but not the same. Neither was I. The check from the court-appointed liquidation didn't just rebuild the farm, it reinforced it, literally. The new silos were steel-clad with temperature controls and pressure sensors. The barn was rebuilt on concrete with internal fire suppression and a private surveillance system wired to a backup generator. And the new combine? God, that thing ran smoother than a whiskey on payday. Tracked, computerized, made my old John Deere look like a rusted lawnmower. But money only fixes the outside. It couldn't bring back the photo albums my dad left in the old office trailer. Couldn't restore the trees along the creek that shaded the land for 4 generations. Couldn't undo the moment I realized someone I trusted helped mark my farm for destruction. TJ stuck around. Not on payroll anymore, but he'd come by sometimes to help out. Said it was therapy. I didn't ask questions. We didn't talk about what happened. He did what needed doing, and I let him. Rick Gomez moved out of the county. Last I heard, he was working construction up near Denton and going to church again. We spoke once after the trial. He thanked me. Said the guilt was eating him alive, but the confession helped. Karen, still locked up, serving her 18-year sentence in a state facility outside Houston. Her appeals failed. The judge wrote in his denial that she remains unwilling to accept the gravity of her actions. I didn't celebrate when I heard that. I didn't need to. My revenge wasn't her punishment. It was the sign. That jet black gate stood like a scar at the east entrance to the farm. Every so often, tourists or curious locals would drive by, slow down, and gawk at the blood-red lettering. Festival canceled. For good. Some took pictures. A few HOA bloggers called it tasteless and vindictive. I didn't care. Let them build their own gates and see what it takes to earn that kind of iron. The Oakwood Rise subdivision didn't survive as a community. With no HOA to police everything from lawn length to mailbox color, the place unraveled faster than a cheap garden hose. Some folks adapted, others sold and fled. The pool closed. The clubhouse got repossessed. Someone turned Karen's old house into an Airbnb with a 5-star rating and a sarcastic name, the clubhouse at Camp Arson. I didn't laugh. Much. But not everything went dark. Something strange happened after the dust settled. People started asking for my opinion. Local farmers, city councilmen. A land use policy group from Austin even invited me to speak on individual rights in managed communities. I told them what I knew. Don't let anyone tell you your land is a community asset just because they want to barbecue on it. Don't let people who've never bled for a place tell you what it's worth. And don't ever mistake silence for surrender. I turned them down when they offered to fly me out to Washington. Told them I had a real field to deal with, not the metaphorical ones they liked so much. But I gave them one line they used in the brochure anyway. You don't own the land if you're too scared to say no. It printed well, apparently. Got quoted more than I thought it would. Still, none of that mattered as much as watching the first shoots of corn break through the soil that spring, seeing green again, smelling it, knowing the land still breathed, even after fire. Especially after fire. One morning, I walked Duke down to the creek, his back legs slower now but still full of purpose. We stopped at the edge of what once was Karen's dream stage site. Just grass now, birds overhead, a good silence. I turned to go, then paused, looking back one last time. The wind moved through the field like it was whispering, and for the first time in over a year, I didn't hear fire. I heard peace.